Maybe that's it.
Coming through.
Yeah, potentially.
Was that the problem?
We were frozen in a state of, I don't know what it was, disrepair. But
chassis.
Our lovely faces frozen. People got to stare at us for quite some time. I hope we were all holding reasonably normal facial expressions. Maybe not you, Nathan.
I don't even know if Nathan's still there, if he can hear us.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can, yeah. How are you? Okay, so you were picking your wet blanket 11 of the season so far. We got to Fabinho. The midfield probably has plenty of different players who you think might be an opportunity. Like, I mean, Nottingham Forest signed about 27 players, many of whom have not seen any game time. We're not really counting those because we didn't have that high expectation of them. Is that...
That's the thing. Do you put Jesse Lingard in because of the price that he cost and the lack of impact so far? Or did you have a high expectation that Jesse Lingard was going to go to Nottingham Forest and transform them?
I did not.
I didn't. So I did base this on maybe
Calvin
previous
Phillips
form.
Obviously is somebody who...
But he hasn't got any game time. He was injured, remember, until... He basically had an operation to get himself fit for the World Cup and sacrificed the first half of the season and came back in a state of disrepair. And let's give Calvin Phillips a little bit more time. Here's who I've gone for in the attacking positions. Adama Traore. 26 now, Adama Traore. And I keep thinking it's going to happen for him. Went off to Barcelona last season. Didn't particularly happen from there. Is back at Wolves, sort of in and out of the team. He gets the ball in those dangerous positions on the halfway line now, and you're not in any ways convinced that he's going to just skip past the midfield and then skip past the fullbacks and have a little bit of end product there as well. I think he's really flattered to deceive. I don't know how he's going to fit into a Lopetegui team. Does he stay at the club? Does he end up leaving in this January transfer window? But from a position 2.5 years ago where it really felt like this guy was on the verge of getting to the very top level, it's gone very flat for Adama Traore so far.
Is Adama Traore one of those players who actually, if he went to a super club, Barcelona probably maybe disproves this, but if he did go to a good team, that actually he would do well, whereas the responsibility of trying to be a key player in a team who's struggling is too much for him?
Quite possibly, and the fact that Wolves don't score many goals, don't really have a striker. Ever since Raul Jimenez got the injury, it's been a massive struggle. They haven't been able to replace him. So when he does make those runs, is there anybody there to actually finish them off?
Yeah.
So even going to Barcelona last season, was it the best time ever to go to Barcelona?
No.
Perhaps not. And he does look totally shot confidence-wise compared to where he was, where, you know, he was carrying himself like a player who could destroy any defence in the Premier League. He does look like a player who needs a move probably in this January transfer window just to revitalise his career.
Okay, who else?
Jared Bowen. Jared Bowen, last season, we were talking about, you know, should be in the English squad. Is he going to put a bit of pressure on for a place in the team? He was a key figure in a brilliant West Ham team that knew what they were about, that finished really high up the table, scored a huge amount of goals last season. And this season, much like a lot of his West Ham teammates, has done next to nothing. You don't know what they're going to do. They obviously signed players who, both of whom could have gotten this list as well, in Scamacca and Paqueta. I left Paqueta off just because he hasn't played enough games. They spent a huge amount of money on him, and everybody around West Ham who talks about their season getting back on track seems to put it on his shoulders that if we get this guy a run of starts at number 10, he is going to be one of the all-time West Ham greats, but we just haven't seen him yet. But Bowen set such a high level last season that he was been linked with a top 4 team. The expectation was he would have to go at some stage. Arguably Declan Rice could have been in there as well. Another player who was outstanding last season, who maybe has one eye on a move and who doesn't seem to be able to lift this West Ham side out of their slumber.
You bottled that, didn't you? You should have just stuck Declan Rice in there. Come on.
Out of pure bitterness.
Even for the headline.
I apologise.
But Jared Bowen's
you were overawed because of what happened with Lee Keegan. It's fine.
That's fair. The Bowen one, Nathan, like, I know he's 26, but last season felt like a bit of a breakout Premier League season for him. He was so good. It reminds me of the Crucible curse in snooker, where the first time someone wins a World Snooker Championship, they never defend it. That is a curse. I almost find that when you have a breakout year in the Premier League, like Bowen did, there seems to be a bit of a curse. There's a bit more pressure, and Bowen just, for whatever reason, hasn't lived up to that pressure.
Well, there's a track record of it at West Ham, and maybe it is simply that opposition teams look at them and go, well, if we stop him, we stop a lot of West Ham. So there was Soucek, and then Soufal comes in, and both of those haven't been able to maintain the impact they had week in, week out, because teams understandably now, when they're defending a set piece, look at Thomas Soucek and go, well, he's the first guy we need to stop. And likewise with West Ham, there's every possibility they're looking at them and saying, if you stop Jarrod Bowen, you stop a lot of the good stuff that comes through for that team. But he's going to have to find a way around that if he is to get back to a level where he's been talked about as a potential Jurgen Klopp signing.
Who's up front for you?
Well, maybe are we going to 3? Maybe we're going to 3. Heung-min Son. Heung-min Son won the Golden Boot last season. He scored in 2 games so far this year. 2 games all season. He got a hat-trick against Leicester and he scored last weekend. And even watching Tottenham, as frustrating, I'm sure, for Spurs fans as they could be, last year when they were playing this counter-attacking football, all of their counter-attacks came through Heung-min Son. There was no greater sight than Heung-min Son picking the ball up 10 yards outside his own penalty area and putting the head down and not really having to lift it because he knew where Harry Kane would be every time, and either skinning 4 players and trying to finish it off himself or setting Harry Kane up. And the understanding that those two had seems to have been lost this season with the signings that they've made, and maybe a slight change in system where, you know, even Perisic has come into the team. Maybe Kulusevski, Richarlison, all of those have meant that we don't even seem to see Heung-min Son pick up the same positions and have the same role in the team. And that has to be a huge reason for Spurs' struggles over the last few weeks. That, like, he was rightly a contender for player of the season last year with the amount of assists he got and obviously finishing his Golden Boot. So I think Tottenham fans at the start of this year would have expected a similar level from Heung-min Son, and that has not happened.
Okay, who else?
Wilfried Zaha. I love Wilfried Zaha. I just feel that I always felt, again, he was another one who was on the verge of going big, and he started the season very well. He got 4 goals in his first 4 games, but it's fallen quite flat since then. And Damien Delaney was on giving his analysis of Crystal Palace, and his decline over the past couple of months has really fed into their inconsistency since the first 5-6 weeks of the year. Maybe there is a sense of him that the time has now gone for Wilfried Zaha. He turned 30 a few months ago.
I don't think so. I actually
he's
think
not going to get his move back to the Manchester Uniteds of this world.
Well, I mean, if you're Zaha's agent, you're saying, write it out. Do not sign whatever they put in front of you. Don't get caught in a room alone with any man who has a pen and a piece of paper for you. Stay away from them. And at the end of the season, I guarantee you, some good club will be willing to back up the Brinks truck to Zaha's gaff, because I still think he's going to be effective for them. It just feels like he's playing at the string. This is a contract year for him, right? I'm right? Yeah,
he's out of contract in the summer. Yeah.
Do not sign anything. Stay where you are. I did get I got some significant pushback when I was like, oh, any team from Palace down could still be in the relegation zone. Any of those teams could still sink like a stone. Yeah. I'm not saying they're going to get relegated, but they're not out of it. Yeah. The way they're playing at the moment is really bad.
Also, on Wilfried Zaha, the reason why I love him is he's very good on social media. There was a post yesterday, the day before, I think, someone on Sky Sports, one of those transfer rumour shows, was wearing like a fairly dodgy shirt, something that I might be seen to be wearing. And Zaha replied and was like, I think they were talking about Zaha's future and what he should do. And he was like, I don't know which is worse, the shite coming out of his mouth or the shirt.
Wow.
And I mean, it was brilliant. He obviously got a lot of love.
So what was your man saying? That Zaha what?
Don't clip him on this.
What's that, Nathan?
Don't tag him on this.
No, maybe not.
Oh, I'm saying, like, back yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
And top 4, Chelsea at least, will come calling. Instead of a crappy quiz this week, just get Shane to drop some crappy comparisons for an hour. I mean, it's good quality radio, turns out.
Don't be jealous.
Who knew? No. That's his niche. Nathan, one last thing you wanted to bring up, Aidan McGeady.
Yeah,
I only picked 10 players there. But
go on.
It's an underwhelming team, so it should be maybe just 10 players. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, nailed on. Scored in his debut, has done absolutely nothing since. Maybe expectations weren't that high, particularly once Thomas Tuchel left. But yeah, it's a bad position Chelsea have got themselves in if they can't get rid of him over the next few weeks.
I'll raise you Aubameyang and give you Jamie Vardy, who last night missed an absolute sitter for Leicester against Newcastle. I think it's 1 Premier League goal he scored this season. I know he's 36 per Jamie, but he's crap at the minute, isn't he, Nathan?
Had some stuff on his mind.
Yeah, of course.
He's a victim of a team around them that hasn't been invested in, that has had James Maddison injured for large parts of the season. I'm surprised how well he does still at 36 when he comes on. Yeah, the goals have dried up a little bit, but I think it's reflective of greater problems at Leicester. And obviously he's maybe had some other things on his mind over the first few months of the season.
Yeah. Just a few things.
Public humiliation.
Yeah, there you go. All right, we'll talk Aidan McGeady some other time. Nathan, good stuff. Thanks very much for your underwhelming 11 of the season so far. It's 9 minutes past 8 here on OTBAM. Slight apologies about the gremlins in the system a little bit earlier on, but we're back up and running on all your usual platforms. If you want to get in touch, you can get us 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number, or you can leave a comment on the YouTube stream, youtube.com/off the ball. We're going to be talking about rugby with Alison Miller, getting the depth chart of the backs, not the half backs. We'll do them again. That's in just a moment. But a reminder, Braeburn Coffee is the official coffee partner of OTB. Start the new year with a delicious Braeburn oat milk coffee. January never tasted as good. It's available at Apple Green locations nationwide. Last night, a slight tangent, we're talking about Roy Keane's chat with Tommy Tiernan.
Keane, if you want him to trounce all over Ferguson, if you want him to do certain things, he'll do it. If you encroach on anything more intimate, the shutters come down and he sees it a mile away. And I think Tommy found that out, to the point where when he asked him, what's the most difficult thing about parenthood? And Roy said, nothing. Tommy, are you effing serious? Yeah. And then when he asked him about, what is it about dogs? And the answer was, I just like walking them. Tommy was like, are the questions too hard? And then he said to him, well, you're very guarded.
Yeah.
And I that was almost the most revealing aspect of the interview. Roy is incredibly guarded.
That's exactly what I want to say, though. It's like, what makes that bad television? Because Roy Keane is going to give a Roy Keane interview, and you can talk to him you can talk all the things we've heard a million times before about his career, and that's what he was trying to go to all the time. And he was talking about, how this, he did this in his football career, he did that, and now he's happy just walking the dogs, and it's all interesting because you'd listen to Roy Keane read the phone book, right? But he said it all before, and it's kind of flat. There's nothing deeper. But Tommy kept asking him, and he didn't want to answer. And the interviewer on national TV tells him he's guarded, slags him about not answering the questions. I thought it was brilliant television.
Yeah.
Do you understand? I don't
think it was a bad interview.
Yeah, sorry, I don't think you understand.
It was a tussle.
It was like, do you know what I mean? I suppose is what I was trying to say. Yeah, I thought there was something really intriguing about that.
I did wonder why Roy
wasn't. And Roy is an amazing stonewall. He just was like, even in the face of a completely different tactic than he would have seen before in an interviewer of someone who just wasn't giving up, was openly calling him what he was doing. And Roy was still stonewalling, which made it awkward and strange. But that's brilliant. Why do we want to see the same Late Late Show? It's like people who want Tommy Tiernan. He's so good on that show. He should be on the Late Late Show. It's like, why? So we can be on the do a Late Late Show interview
so
instead of this.
Have 10 minutes to ask pre-prepared questions.
Exactly. So it's like that's the type of thing you can only get in the Tommy Tiernan show. So why people are disappointed with it, I have no idea. What do you want? Roy Keane's not going to give you any more.
We've seen the other interview so many times as well. Like, I even think back to, we were talking in the office earlier about the Vieira Keane sit down. Remember when Gary Neville had to walk around with him? I think it was last summer.
Which was great.
Which was fantastic.
He was very open with Neville.
These are great watches, but we have that kind of story already. While I felt that Tiernan was trying to go into a slightly different direction.
I thought with Neville asked him about losing his father and got to some interesting places. I thought he obviously trusts Neville instantly.
Teammate, yeah.
There was definitely, because the first half of the interview was far tougher than the second half. There was a degree behind the stonewall and the eyes, like the darting eyes, trying to work out what's the hidden agenda here on Tiernan's part. Like, I thought he was really trying to work out what's going on here. Like, where are you going with that question? That's a weird question.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Off the Ball Daily.
A home for your favourite podcasts from Off the Ball. The performance rankings, a slight tangent, the crappy quiz, and you had to be there.
5 goals in 20 minutes. It's just, you can't do that. It's the Premier League. You can't do that.
Subscribe to the Off the Ball Daily podcast feed right now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Okay, it is early January, which means it's depth chart season when it comes to the Irish rugby team for the Six Nations, and I'm delighted to say Alison Miller is with us. Alison, good morning to you. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, good. Getting to that stage where the team news is coming through from other countries about injuries that are going to take players out of the Six Nations, and we're like, so far, it's actually... So Sexton got injured, but it looks like he's going to be back. So far, touch wood, with loads of games to still be played, we're in a relatively good spot, which means picking your depth chart is fairly straightforward, I think. From your perspective, we've asked you for the wingers, centres and fullback, and this isn't very complicated at the moment, is it?
I'm laughing at that because I found it quite hard. I found it difficult. obviously because you're looking at the different provinces and who's playing well, and like some provinces there aren't playing particularly well, and then you're judging it on like when they go into camp, who performs in camp and who's bringing form in, and then who fits into the system and who works well together. So I didn't think it was that straightforward. But my 11 was James Lowe. My 12 is Bundy Aki. Now that's presuming that Henshaw is out. I'm just ruling him out. He might be back, he might not be, but I'm just ruling him out. 13, Gary Ringrose. 14, Mac Hansen. And 15, Hugo Keenan.
Let's start with Mac Hansen. He got the haircut. I still haven't seen the haircut, but everybody's raving about it.
I haven't either.
It's apparently the first time since he got to Ireland he's had his haircut, which is okay, right? There was like
interesting timing.
Well, it is. He said his form was a bit listless over the last few weeks, and then it bounced back after the haircut. So anyway, because he's got the scrum cap on, I can't tell the difference. But we were talking about this at the end of the year, looking back, and one of the questions in the crappy quiz was, when did he make his debut? And if you told me he made his debut in the middle of COVID for Ireland, I would have said, yeah, that makes sense. But it was only last year in the Six Nations that he made his first full start, which, when you think about it, is a meteoric rise. And he's straight in, and no one's blinking there.
Yeah, he looks very comfortable playing for Ireland, and he's consistently played well for Ireland when he's got his opportunities. Like, I think he's a kind of winger that Andy Farr likes. He gets off his wing, he gets involved, he goes roaming. He's very good in the air, and he's impressed every time he's got an opportunity for Ireland. He's impressed. I think that just says it all about him. He's obviously a guy for the big day, and that shows. So, like, he hasn't done anything wrong. Obviously, you know, sometimes your form in a province, or, you know, your quality of ball that you're getting can affect your form, and that's why I'm saying, like, sometimes then when you go into camp, things can change up, and who's performing in a Six Nations camp, you know, it can be not as straightforward as that, and who slots in well into the system that they're trying to play. But I've been very impressed with him since he's debuted for Ireland, and he's scored some good tries, and he's constantly been involved.
Yeah, I don't know if we understood that he was an X-Factor style player when he was in the team, but as soon as he scored the try against France that time, you're like, all right, okay, we never scored tries like that. That's amazing.
Yeah, he has a bit of flair, and I think you can see in his personality, he's a bit of a character, and I think sometimes as a winger, I think you have to have a bit of that flamboyance nearly. You have to have that willingness to do something special and try things, and he certainly has that. And I'd say from his rugby that he really enjoys it. So I think playing at that high level and where there's pressure, I'd say it suits him. It suits his personality.
James Lowe obviously is on the other wing, and Lowe brilliant in the 3-test series against the All Blacks, and then was injured for ages, and there was an opportunity there for other people to come in and stake a claim, and we really wanted to see how Balakoon would do, and Balakoon did okay. He did like totally fine for somebody who's at that few caps stage, but unfortunately at the weekend, another hamstring injury from Balakoon. The Belfast Telegraph are speculating that might put his Six Nations in doubt, and so that's a bit of a disaster from his perspective. So who else is close to these two at the moment? Who's pushing either of these two to get into the team for you?
I think Jimmy O'Brien and Larimer for me are, like, Larimer is starting to come into kind of the form that he showed probably, or the form that he shows when he's playing really well. He obviously was man of the match there. Was it last weekend, the weekend before? He's got really good feet. And then Jimmy O'Brien, obviously, he's quite versatile in that he could cover, obviously, 15 as well. But the two of those guys, I think, would be, for me, pushing those two, James Lowe and Mac Hansen. And like, O'Brien is one of these people that just does the simple things well. He's a good distributor, defensively good, you know. Obviously we don't need to talk, we all know what Larimer can do. He's amazing feet, and he was really, really good 2 weekends ago. So for me, those two guys are there and thereabouts, and who knows within the environment of Six Nations camps how things might look. So those two for me were kind of the ones that are staking a claim, or, you know, potentially still be in it. We don't know, I suppose, the ins and outs of the internal workings of, as I keep saying, a camp environment, who's training and playing well.
Is this Six Nations, Alison, a perfect opportunity to play someone like Jimmy O'Brien a little bit more, especially when it's a World Cup year, especially when you maybe want to give some players a rest? I know the World Cup is still months and months away, but it's an opportunity to showcase players and to see what they can do in a pressurised environment.
Yeah, it's the age-old argument that I think if we're actually seriously going to try and contest a World Cup for once and not come back and talk about this after, we got to actually try people. And like, if we're looking at, like, to me, Hugo Keane is like nailed on 15. He is so solid. He's so consistent. He's a good distributor. He's very good in the air. He's quite evasive without, I suppose, sometimes you look at him and he kind of like sliding and weaving through tackles that he shouldn't get through. So for me, like, could you play someone like Jimmy O'Brien at 15 in a game during the Six Nations and try out these combinations? Because Hugo Keane can't play every game in the World Cup. So for me, it is about putting guys into pressurized situations in a big competition and seeing how they perform, so you know then that they're ready for a World Cup. We don't want to be talking about the same thing after this World Cup. Like, you know, there will be no point if, and other people have different opinions on this. That would be my opinion on it. I think you have to do that.
I think you're right. I think it's the definition of insanity to keep doing the same thing and expecting something different. And I think you raised the point, if we're serious about this, like within the IRFU's business plan, we don't plan to reach a semi-final. Like, we don't bank on it. We don't, and competing in the Six Nations is the be-all and end-all. That's the bread and butter. That's where all of the funding,
money comes from.
You know, yeah. And it's like, okay, but like, that's where the money comes from, because we've never tried. We don't know what it would be like. We don't know how much extra revenue you would generate if we were to reach a semi-final, you know, with a team that's doing well at world level. We don't know what it would be like to dream of being the World Cup winners. Like, oh, we can't dream about that. I mean, that's... Yeah,
because like, what would that do? Like, it would make every young boy and girl out there want to play the game. That might be going down other sports because it's not them. It's just something that's not capturing their attention. But what better way to capture attention so you get more people into the game, and then that will start to yield results. So
you're from a GAA family, right? Like, steeped in GAA. So what do you make
completely
of that? What do you make of? I watched your dad play for a tie in the 80s. What do you make of that joy that so many people in the GAA community take whenever the rugby team fails?
I think it's changing. I think I'm actually in a room and we'll have to walk. The lights are going. I can see me. 2 seconds. There are censored lights. Give me a minute.
We were having issues ourselves this morning. It is something that.
Sorry, technology. I'm back. So I think that's changing. I think definitely the rugby community or the GA community definitely feel more part of rugby, and I think maybe there is still that, I suppose, exclusivity to some parts of rugby, and maybe they just feel a little bit, removed from that if that's not their avenue. Obviously, guys like Sean O'Brien, Tyke Furlong, and all these guys that have come up through the club system have kind of changed the game. But I definitely think I'd be still involved heavily in GA, helping with a team in Carlow at the moment, and the majority would really get behind rugby. They would. I would have to say that majority will go watch it and they'll go to the games, and but I think the next step is sometimes they don't feel like they could play, and that's kind of the issue. So they'll support it and they'll enjoy it and they'll watch the World Cups and they'll watch Six Nations and they'll go to games, but it's why do they maybe feel like they won't play? So and some of them are playing, but it would probably be a small cohort of any group of people in other sports that will take satisfaction in seeing another sport lose. I'm sure that's the same in other sports.
Yeah, but, there's definitely a soccer crowd who also have the same feelings about. There's the only shared crossover of the Venn diagram is a shared hatred for the rugby team doing well. And look, I understand there's a lot of hype around the rugby team, but I do wonder if there's at the core of it is a fear of if the rugby team actually delivered on what they're capable of doing, then a lot of heads would be turned and a lot of time and investment and energy, and the best young players in the country would aspire to be rugby players as opposed to playing GAA or soccer.
Yeah, that's probably definitely the case. And I think because it is quite compared to soccer. Even like, I mean, if you no disrespect maybe the League of Ireland, but if you wanted to make it big in soccer, you might have to go off to England or whatever. Within Ireland, you've got your 4 provinces there within reach, and you become professional, and it's attractive. And so yeah, maybe there is that fear, but I think also on the other side of it, some of our most promising athletes, as you know yourself, being involved in GA, like you look at any club team or county team, and the athleticism of those guys and girls is phenomenal, and it's what our country plays. It's like I think we have to even look at a bigger picture. Like if you think of, I'm from Laois, I mean, there's only 2 rugby clubs in the whole of Laois, but I mean, within a small area where I'm from, you've got like a lot of GA clubs, and it's kind of, they love playing. And so like if we had success in a World Cup, what could that do? Yet so much more people playing, maybe more clubs, and who knows, we could be like world beaters. Like, you know, I'm ambitious. But, you know, it's an interesting one, because I think there's still probably a small cohort, if you're thinking of like, say, Leinster rugby, outside of Dublin, it's probably not as extensive as, you know, your areas in Dublin that are playing rugby.
Definitely loads of work to be done. Definitely loads. Sorry, that was a complete tangent of discussion there. Sorry to throw it on you.
Just go off on a tangent.
But I think it is an interesting an interesting thing to think about at this stage, when we could do it more depth. We could definitely do it more depth. To go back to the depth chart, you pick Bundy Aki at 12 and you pick Gary Ringler as 13 on the basis, really, as you said, that Henshaw isn't fit at the moment. We thought McCluskey was kind of getting to that stage where he might be in consideration for this, but he's just not as good as Bundy or as effective as Bundy.
Yeah, like I thought, like he did impress me in the autumn internationals, and he was obviously unlucky in that first game to do the arm injury, and he came back. But I think like he did well. I'm not saying he didn't do well, but I don't think he just did enough to kind of usurp Bundy Aki. I think Bundy Aki has that test match experience. He's proven at that level, and I think he's obviously huge physicality, and he's proven. So I think like McCluskey is not too far behind, but I think he just did, like, he's obviously McCluskey. He's a great, because brilliant ability to offload. He's physical. He's quite a good distributor, and we're seeing more of that, especially when he was in green. And but I just don't think he's just done enough to stake the claim to be over Bundy in that sense.
You had Hugo Keane, was it at 15? Alison as well. Like,
yeah.
I'm looking at last year's Six Nations squad, and you see someone like Michael Lowry in there, and I know he's just returned back into the Ulster team as well after being rested. But like, will the Ulster players, for example, suffer as a result of their absolutely shocking form?
Potentially, but I think at the same time, depends how Andy Farrell is doing it. He knows the calibre of those Ulster players and what they can produce, and like, you know, that can happen. Like, it would have happened to me over the years where you mightn't have had a particularly good lead into a Six Nations playing for your province and you didn't play well. But I mean, at the end of the day, Andy Farrell knows what they're capable, and if they're in a system, which they are in Irish, and there's certain things going on, I mean, there has to be that element too, that once they come into camp, they should have time to maybe see what they're about. But it doesn't help. It certainly doesn't help matters. Because Mike Lowry, like, he's like an exciting player. He's a good distributor, and like, as I said, I don't think Hugo Keane can, like, if we're going to be smart about trying to achieve at a World Cup, I don't think maybe he should play every single game in the Six Nations. Like, that's just my opinion, and I would be very different to a lot of people on this. But because I'd be thinking more about trying to achieve at a World Cup as opposed to having the same old argument after. I'm sick of it. Like, so yeah, I think potentially it might affect them just slightly, you know. But you're hoping that they'll get the opportunity if they get chosen into a camp, into a squad.
Alison, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
No hassle, guys. Have a good day. Bye bye.
That's Alison Miller. Alison Miller there, giving us her thoughts on the depth chart. We'll do the halfback pairings soon enough.
There is something there. Even you look at football, Harry Maguire, where you're in club, it's not going well, and then it's almost like a release valve is let off when you go to international duty.
Players, yeah,
100%. So they might actually, regardless of form with the province,
absolutely
take something to the Six Nations.
All right, 28 minutes past 8 this morning. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Now, I'm delighted to say Andy Mitten is with us. Andy, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. I'm okay, thank you.
It's been tradition over, I'd say, the last 5 years where we would talk to you in the aftermath of a succession of defeats or a transfer clearly not working out, or significant difficulties. How is life for you at the moment? You must be, different, happy.
Yeah, aside from getting absolutely soaked at Old Trafford by more biblical rains last night before the Charlton Athletic League Cup quarter-final, I think like most Manchester United fans, I'm very happy with the team, which keeps on winning, 8 consecutive wins, not conceding goals. With the manager, I was fortunate enough to have a long sit down with him last month on a training camp in Spain, and I came out of that meeting with a higher opinion than when I went in. He knows his stuff. He knows exactly what he wants. The players respect him. After the game last night, I spoke to Tom Heaton, the goalkeeper, who made his debut over 20 years after making his reserve team debut for Manchester United. And he talked about the way in which Ten Hag manages. The players respect him. Basically, if you're not playing well, you get dropped. It doesn't matter who you are. And I think all the calls he's made have been the right ones. Last night was enjoyable, apart from the weather. Charlton Athletic, managed by a big Manchester United fan from Salford, didn't disgrace themselves at all. They conceded 2 late goals, so the 3-0 scoreline maybe flattered Manchester United a little bit. But 5 minutes in, I thought it was going to be 5-6-0. United looked like they were going to destroy Charlton. They had 10,000 travelling fans. I love it that the Cup throws up huge ticket allocations like that and lots of travelling fans. And because Manchester United have been drawn at home for 8 consecutive Cup matches now, the odds on that are 255 to 1. And it's definitely the travelling fans who are coming to Manchester United. I think United fans long for just one away game in the Cup. It's been a while. It really has. Pre-COVID.
Wow, I didn't realise that. Okay, Jesus.
Yeah. Every single time the draw comes out and it's Manchester United at home, and it's freaky. I mean, 255 to 1. I'm not convinced that if United reach the final of this competition, which would give them a good chance of winning a first trophy since 2017, that they won't switch the game from Wembley to Old Trafford. Because how are Manchester United going to cope by playing a cup match away from Old Trafford?
Well, it will definitely be interesting to see. And I'm sure if you're the manager, you're absolutely delighted because you're building a fortress, you're building home form, you're building that sense of occasion, even around matches that aren't the bread and butter. And it's good. It's a really good opportunity for Ten Hag to become associated with a team that wins trophies early in his tenure, which is exactly what he needs, isn't it?
Yeah, United have not won a trophy since 2017. The cup competitions allow him to use some fringe players. Kobe Manu, a Mancunian, made his full debut last night. He did okay. Facundo Palestri came on. His first minutes since signing for Manchester United over 2.5 years ago. He did really well. He was only on the pitch for 10 minutes. Marcus Rashford keeps on scoring. He's more prolific now than he has ever been, because up until 2 months ago, you wouldn't have described him as being a prolific goal scorer. Casemiro is one of the best players in the world and shows it week in, week out. Rafael Varane, it didn't play against Charlton, but he shows why he's one of the best defenders in the world. So there are positives all over. You can always pick out possible negatives or areas for improvement. Anthony, for example, cost a lot of money. Not quite happening for him, even though he scored against Charlton. He has been scoring a couple of important goals. Jadon Sancho is out the firing line at the moment. Anthony Martial is at least fit, but he's not firing. And goal scorers tend to need to score goals before too long. Harry Maguire has not had the season he would have expected. I saw you mention him before this interview started, but he played last night. He did okay, but he's someone who's going to want to be playing football. But he's not in the starting 11 of Ten Hag's best Manchester United side at the moment. So Manchester United, as ever, remain really interesting. There's loads of storylines around the club. Games coming thick and fast. There's a possibility that United could play 6 home games this month. 6. I've never known anything like it. It's rained at every one of them so far. When you produce a paper-based product like we do and have lads standing outside Old Trafford It's horrendous, honestly. It's so frustrating because we put so much time into it. You get to the ground, and last night it was like someone just switched on a shower. It wasn't like Mancunian drizzle. It was just like standing there under a power shower. Anyway, enough of that.
Wonder what the odds are of that as well. All the rain at all the home games. Never mind the fact that they have so many home games of late. Andy, we might pick apart a couple of the names that you just mentioned. I remember an anecdote years ago when Wayne Rooney, I think, came back from injury, and some commentator or pundit said he was like a dog getting off a leash, chomping at the bit to play football. Marcus Rashford. I know he only came on for the last while last night, but 2 brilliant goals. Looks like a man transformed, Andy.
Yeah, he is. There's a couple of reasons for that. He had a full pre-season, and so only the second time that that's happened. So I spoke to him in Perth pre-season at the end of a successful pre-season tour, and he just said, I'm feeling miles better than I've ever felt before. And that's fed into this season. 2, a manager who improved him and gives him confidence and has been strict with him several times this season, most recently against Wolves when he dropped him for an internal issue where Marcus overslept. And the good thing about the manager is he's consistent with everyone. Doesn't matter whether you're Cristiano Ronaldo or Marcus Rashford. There are rules. If you don't abide by them, you lose your place in the team. And that seems very fair to me. He's scoring. It's wonderful watching him when he's confident. I think he's scaled back a lot of the non-football stuff, and I think that's to his benefit. I like the fact that he did a lot of that non-football stuff, taking the British government to task. I think anyone who pushes for free school meals for kids who deserve them should be applauded. But it definitely became a distraction, and his form suffered massively. And when I speak to people at the club around him, and I ask what you've just asked me, and I ask people who see him every day, they tend to come back and say he's smiling every day. He's enjoying his football. And I think if you're enjoying your job, and you're fortunate enough to do a job like be a footballer, and you're fit, you're not injured, because he had a lot of niggling injuries, and his confidence was helped by a decent World Cup. He'd not played for England for over a year, and he came back. He scored in Qatar. England didn't do too badly. They went out in that fantastic game against France. So Marcus Rashford is in a very good place mentally at the moment. And he's used that word, not me. Used it several times. He used it after scoring a header. You don't always associate Marcus Rashford with headers, against West Ham just before the World Cup. So the fans are singing for him. Stretford End was singing for him last night. And it's been a great season so far for Marcus Rashford. If you ask me who Manchester United's player of the season have been so far, it would be him or Casemiro, with notable mentions to players like Lisandro Martinez, another new signing who's doing well.
It's funny, the thing about Ten Hag when he was coming in was it was somebody who has a tactical vision, a technical vision for what he wants. The man management side of stuff, obviously, it has to go hand in hand with that. And being a grown-up, being somebody who kind of has that long-term vision and something to fall back on is hugely helpful. So he obviously is marrying the mentality of what everybody needs to do with a technical instruction, making Rashford a better player, coaching him in a way. Is there something specific on that side, apart from the fact that Rashford is enjoying it? Is there a change in role? Is there more responsibility given? Is there like a tweak that has happened on the technical and tactical side?
I think the absence of Cristiano Ronaldo is helping Marcus Rashford. He's no longer there in a dressing room where Cristiano was not always a positive factor. He can be one of the main men now. Erik Ten Hag has brought in coaches. It's not just about Erik Ten Hag. Really diverse coaching base. He's got a Japanese analyst. There's not many Japanese people working in the Premier League. He's got Benny McCarthy, a black South African coach. Benny felt that he wasn't getting the opportunities that he might have got if he was white. And a lot of black coaches will say the same. And Benny McCarthy's a really good coach. He did well in South Africa in management. And Erik Ten Hag brought him in. Benny speaks 5 languages. Benny scored big goals in Champions League matches. I mean, he even knocked Manchester United out. Players like that. They like seeing someone who can still ping the ball and head the ball in training, who can wind them up and say, listen, boys, when you've won what I've won, come and have a serious chat with me. It helps with the mood. But on a more detailed basis, he can actually say, have you thought about doing this? Because he's been there and done that. So there's a real mixture of coaches there, and they're good foils for Ten Hag. They're not yes men. They challenge him. Mitchell van der Gaag is number 2. He's been a manager at big clubs. He doesn't need the job. He'd get another job tomorrow if he left Manchester United. He's quite happy to challenge Erik Ten Hag. So he's created a really good working environment. It's a serious one. He's a disciplinarian. But I've spoken to people in that environment, and there were times on the pre-season when they looked at the watches and it's suddenly 11:30 at night, and Ten Hag's like, have a beer, lads. We're doing a lot of work here. And that doesn't mean 8 beers. That's not a pre-season tour story of old where they end up fighting and doing arm wrestling with American Marines. It's just relax a little bit. And a criticism of Louis van Gaal's Manchester United was that he was too strict. If you were 31 seconds late for a meeting, you'd get fined. And some players just walked away from that. So I'm really, really impressed by Ten Hag. And he's got a very difficult job because he's up against really well-resourced rivals, brilliant managers. One of them will come to Old Trafford on Saturday, Pep Guardiola. And Ten Hag last month, he talked about the strengthening he wants to make, the players that he wants to bring in, and mentioned a load of world-class footballers. And he's been fortunate to be back so far, but Manchester United don't have the money to bring in the players that he would ideally want at the moment, nor do the clubs want to sell him. So he's not always going to get his own way. But in Martinez, in Anthony, in Casemiro, he's brought in 3 really, really good players. Anthony's probably the one who needs to prove himself most out of them. But Casemiro, I can't believe the number of Manchester United fans who doubted him. I'm like, this guy has consistently been one of the best players in the world for a team that wins everything. Why are you even doubting him? Madrid wouldn't let him go. Nonsense, absolute nonsense, right from the start. And I did his first interview when he came to Old Trafford. I want to come here, I want to play in England, I want to play for this club, never mind the money, clearly he's played well. I've won everything, I want to go again. And he's been true to that. Wonderful footballer.
That's an interesting one as well, Andy, because I actually watched one of those interviews early on when he joined Casemiro, and one of the things he said was, I think he was apologising for not being able to speak English yet, and speaking about his desire to learn English and learn the culture of Manchester and England and really bed in with the supporters and the club that way. Kind of reminded me of what a lot of people were saying about Gianluca Vialli since his passing, that was something as well. He used to write down notes when he heard an English phrase or something he didn't understand. Casemiro has that as well, where he's not just joining a football club, he's bedding into the culture.
Yeah, and so are his family living into Manchester. I speak to him quite several times, and he's really enjoying himself. And I did that interview that you're talking about, and I'm always going to come at it from a fan perspective, given my background. And the fact that he couldn't speak English meant that I got that gig because I could speak to him in Spanish. Mm-hmm. And I've watched him several times in Brazil. And he knew loads about Manchester United. And I interview footballers every single day, and some of them stand out like he did. But of course, if you're not doing it on the pitch, none of that really counts for anything. With Vialli, I share the sentiments that pretty much everyone in football did. Fortunate enough to spend a day with him a couple of years ago in Lisbon. Never felt so ugly in my life standing next to that man, interviewing him. I sent my wife a picture. She's like, "You look absolutely terrible. You need to up your game here." And he stood there looking like the world's coolest man. It's absolutely tragic that he's died at his age. And I remember him coming into the Premier League and going to Stamford Bridge and watching him. And he was 2 steps ahead, and Ruud Gullit was as well, of most of them other Chelsea players. And it was great for the Premier League to have players like him. And now if you extend that on, there's more Brazilian internationals living in the northwest of England than in Brazil now. This would have been unheard of to me 10, 20, 30 years ago, but it's happening all the time now. And the Premier League, it just becomes more and more powerful. I watch a lot of La Liga football and can see that it's struggling to go against the Premier League. But Casemiro, when he combines with Varane, they both won everything at Real Madrid. Multiple Champions League winners. And it shows. I think Manchester United fans were a bit scarred because when Radamel Falcao came in, when Angel Di Maria came in, didn't really work out for them. But these two are absolutely brilliant. And if you had another two of that level of players, you suddenly look at a team that can properly challenge, because Manchester City is still ahead of Manchester United in the league. But then when Casemiro plays, United don't really lose matches. It'll be really interesting on Saturday. I still think City will be favourites, but I'd love United to give them a proper game. Not just win on the counter-attack, because Ole Gunnar Solskjaer had some very good results against Manchester City, home and away. But take it to them. Like United took the game to Chelsea in October. Not seen that for a long time. Manchester United attacking away from home against a top team. I realise now that me describing Chelsea as a top team is open to interpretation, but that's how it felt at the time.
You might soon have to, Andy, stand beside the 6'6" tall, blonde and handsome Wout Weghorst if he does clinch this signing for United. It seems fairly close verbal agreement reached, if you're to believe what you read. A bit of a mixed reaction from United fans, it's fair to say. Seems like maybe a short-term solution to a long-term problem, albeit it'll only be a loan deal. But what do you make of this one if it does come through?
I think your summation there is really accurate. Ten Hag has got a compromise. He's not going to sign Mbappe this month. Manchester United have spent the money. Rivals are not going to sell top centre forwards in the January transfer window unless that forward actively wants to get out, like Aubameyang did to Barcelona a year ago. He wanted to leave. There'd been a breakdown there. Arsenal wanted shut of him. That's not happening this year. So I think fans with this one will say more power to the manager's elbow. They'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He knows what he's doing. He's been good with his signings so far. The statistics of the player are good. Didn't work out for him at Burnley, but you can't really hold that against him too much. Made a big impression in the World Cup. He's a goal scorer. And Manchester United need another striker. They need another option. He would have played last night against Charlton Athletic. He's a tall target man. Manchester United do not have a player like that at the moment. And if you think that United took Cristiano Ronaldo out the squad, Mason Greenwood out of the squad, Edinson Cavani out the squad, you free attackers down on a year ago. Facundo Palestre deserves a mention. He's a forward player. He came on for the last 10 minutes against Charlton. Really, really good. Very fast, very tricky. So that's a potential future positive. And of course, Alejandro Garnacho had a really good run out against Charlton, influential throughout the game. He's still raw, still got to improve, but very exciting player. And the fans are getting off the seats when they're watching him. And that stadium's full every week. Never known anything like this either. The league games were always full. The Champions League games were always full. But the League Cup games and the Europa League games are full. There's a huge demand to watch live football. And it's not just at Manchester United. There's non-league teams around Manchester and league clubs like Stockport County, Bolton Wanderers, getting massive crowds. It's amazing.
Andy, we'll leave it there. Great to talk to you. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Thank you.
That's Andy Mitten there, the publisher of United We Stand. It's 8:47. You're watching OTB AM. Thanks very much for being part of our journey today. You can get us at youtube.com/Off The Ball. You can follow us at Off The Ball AM on Twitter as well. It's time for the first one of these this year. It's Virtual Insanity.
You have entered Power Drive.
Oh, wow! John Duggan.
Ger and Shane, how are we doing?
Missed that sting. That sting was, I've forgotten how much I loved it.
The warm embrace.
The Donnie Darko. Marshmallow Man. So, Happy New Year to you all. And the reason why we're doing this Virtual Insanity is because it's worked over the last couple of years. So in 2021, we had a profit on our golf tipping of 46.5%. And then last year we had a profit of 25%. So the concept is we have a virtual 1,000 and we put bets on the PGA Tour and the majors every week for about 40 weeks until the end of November. And then we see where the 1,000 has got to by the end of the year. So last year we'd winners at 80 to 1, 66 to 1, 25 to 1 twice and 16 to 1 twice. You'll have your losers, and it's all about being conservative and trying to maybe pick a few golfers each week and trying a bit of fun with it. And if you're going to have a real punt on it, obviously don't gamble more than you can afford. So we're going to start off with the Sony Open in Hawaii at YLA Country Club, where we'd all love to be, but we're not. So we're going to pick 4 golfers this week, and the headline one is Corey Connors from Canada. He's from a place called Listowel in Ontario. Don't know if he's any Kerry blood in him, but he's a 22-1 shot for 4 each way. Corey Connors has got a really good form of the course. He's been 3 times in the top 12 out of 4 starts. It's funny, out of this tournament, of the 24 times the Tournament of Champions has been played the week before at Kapalua, also in Hawaii, 17 of the 24 times the winners come from the week before. It just shows to me that rust can be taken off a player, and Corey Connors did play last week and closed with a 67 600 par round. So he's got the cobwebs gone. He is a brilliant ball striker, which needs to be around the tight par 70 YLA Country Club. His putting is a weakness, but he does put well on Bermuda greens, where he does only win at the Texas Open. So Corey Connors, 4 each way, 22-1, the headline tip. The 3 other players for 2 each way, we've got Keith Mitchell at 35-1. Once again, loves YLA Country Club, 7th last year, 4 top 25s and 5 starts at the Sony Open. Really, really good off the tee, so he can attack the course from the fairway with the second shots. Had a top 10 in November in Houston, and Keith Mitchell is a player that Rory McIlroy's complimented in the past, 31 years of age. I think he could get a second win on the tour this week at 35-1. Christian Bezuidenhout of South Africa is a 28-year-old who I think will win on the PGA Tour this year. He's 45-1 for 2 each way. Played very well in South Africa in November, a tie for 5th and a tie for 3rd. On his debut here last year was tied 17th. Brilliant short game. Once again, not that long off the tee, but he doesn't need to be at this tight track. And he's got a great short game, 6th in the putting stats last year and 1st in scrambling on the limited starts in the PGA Tour this year. For a tough mental guy, Christian Bezuidenhout, who has won 4 times in the DP World Tour. And the last player at 80-1 for 2 each way, Nick Hardy, the Hardy boys. We have Nick Hardy, who only played twice in the PGA Tour a couple of years ago, and one of them was a start here where he was tied 14th. He was a rookie then last season after a really good stint on the Corn Ferry Tour when he was, 2nd in ball striking. But he played pretty poorly last year. Then regrouped and went on the Corn Ferry Tour, got a 2nd place confidence boosting finish, then turned to the US Open at Brookline and was contending through halfway. Then he was 5th in Sanderson Farms Championship in October. I think with a second run now, Nick Hardy, who's a tee to green machine, can have a much more bigger impact this season on the PGA Tour. So Nick Hardy, 80-1. Christian Bezuidenhout, 45-1. Keith Mitchell, 35-1. All 2 each way. And the headline tip for the first Virtual Insanity of 2023 is Corey Connors to bring it home for Listowel, 22-1 for 4 each way, guys. Up Canada.
Keith Mitchell, of course, trying to bring it home for the Queen Vic in EastEnders. Sounds like he's straight out of EastEnders.
Was it not Grant Mitchell?
It is, yeah, but it just sounds like a character
and
name.
Phil,
from the show.
is the long lost brother.
I don't know if there is a Keith. He could be the long
lost brother. Yeah.
Exactly,
now he does have a full head of hair in him.
Oh, okay, so maybe not.
Unlike the other lads.
Not a blood brother.
No. Well, sometimes brothers can look different. Was there a Charlie Cray? There was Reggie and Ron Cray, and then there was a Charlie Cray.
Right.
Yeah.
Unconnected. Uninvolved, was he? I don't know. Is this real?
No, there was a brother. I know there was a brother. I don't know whether he was involved in nefarious activities or organised crime or anything like that, but there was another brother,
right,
as it were, Charlie Cray, as a
non-twin.
Yeah.
For anybody who is
just
getting introduced to this, right? The prices, you got to shop around for the best price.
You do got to shop around. So bookmakers offer different types of value. So some of them will offer a 5th of the odds. There's 144 players in this event. Some will offer them a 5th of the odds each way. So an each way bet is 2 bets. It's to win bet and a place bet to get in the top 8. Some bookmakers might offer better odds for your golfer to finish in the top 5. But you should be going as many places as you can. So you'll have bookmakers like Paddy Power, William Hill, Betfair, Betway, Ladbrokes will all go to 8 places. But there's a website called oddschecker.com, which will give you a suite of prices and you can pick the best price out of that. And that's what I've tried to do here. There's a podcast for this now. You can check out a podcast every week. It's live at the OTB Sports Podcast Network right now. It's also on the website at otbsports.com. You can get the full rationale there. So you can, there's various ways of checking out this Virtual Insanity every week. On Tuesdays, Wednesdays, we'll have it all up for you. And obviously we'll do the majors as well. But yeah, you do have to shop around for the best value. You could have Rory McIlroy one week at 10-1, and then you could have them with 16-1 with another bookmaker, because what bookmakers are doing is they're forming opinions based on their own odds compilers. They have their own people in,
and they're trying to bribe you to come and sign up with them as well. So some week they're going to offer a big price on a golfer, and if that is your fancy that week, then you should be opportunistic.
Yes, and also around the majors you can get massive value. Like the Masters has realistically 60-70 players that can contend. They could be going 10-12 places. So you got to shop around. That's why like Cheltenham, all these big events, they try to get you in, But then once they get you in, you'd also then need to be discerning around it, you know.
That's the last thing I wanted to talk about. You just need to be disciplined about this. You pick big odds at the 80 to 1. It's not a throwaway. Several times over the last couple of years, some of those guys have competed and some of them have actually won.
Yes, and if you can get it's all about, forget about winning and losing, right? I've had 11 winners over the last 2 years, but at the majors last year, I had nothing. I had a disaster in the majors. But it's all about profit. It's not about winning and losing. Like, what I'm trying to do is, I start with 1,000. I'm betting 20 this week. So you're hoping by March, April, you might be around the 900, 1,100 mark. You don't want to be fluctuating too far from the 1,000. You don't want to be at 500.
No.
Because
then you're chasing it.
Yeah, then you're chasing. Then you're into emotional betting, rather than into having a bit of crack with it. Because it is fun. You have 4 days run for your money, and imagine on Sunday evening you might have 2 lads of those 4 in the hunt, and it's a bit of crack, and that's what it should be. It shouldn't be more serious than that.
Yeah, and stick to what you've decided is your stake for the week. Don't be randomly going, I like the odds on this guy, and then also this guy, and then all of a sudden it's like.
If you're getting involved in running golfing, it's a dangerous concept, because weather can change, all these things can change, and you can get really messed up by the fact that on Friday you think, wow, it's going really well for me, and then it's hard for golfers to shoot 4 very good rounds together. Often they'll shoot maybe 2.5 good rounds, and it's how they limit the damage of the other rounds, turning a 75 into a 70, and that's what wins golf tournaments.
John, the scarf is fantastic. You do look like a thespian character, and I'm just after learning something from our producer Colm that shook me to my core, but also doesn't surprise me in a weird way. You were in the Gaiety Theatre School of Acting, and you appeared in a play about a serial killer.
Yeah, I did.
Tell us more.
Yeah, so Colm only asked me this. I wasn't volunteering this information at all. So
it was the scarf that gave it away.
He said I was a thespian, so I got the scarf for Christmas, and I'm trying to use different props, whether it's a beard or a scarf. It's almost like part of my...
the beard's gone.
Part of my big disguise for 2023.
Okay.
No, I just did a couple of nights a week for 2 years at the Gaiety School in my early 20s, and I have to say, my broadcasting really helped my acting, and my acting really helped my broadcasting. It was one of the best things I ever did, just in terms of just personal development. Great fun, great people in the course, and we would learn a load of things each week, just about framing, about aesthetics, about learning lines, about doing plays, about there's various I suppose components of what acting was about. And then at the end of the year, you go and you'd perform in front of 300 or 400 people at the Project Theatre. So I did a David Mamet play. I did an excerpt from that where I was not a good guy, and I took a knife to a person, a lady in the scene, and I would lean in like that and in front of everybody in the audience, and I pull back, and then it was all blood coming all out of her stomach. Now obviously it was red dye. It was we had a big pouch of red dye in her jumper, and whatever way you did it, when I came back from her, like, it was just like all this like red dye everywhere. So it was just kind of the fake props. It was all kind of funny stuff, So, but obviously, the serial killer was only a fictitious thing.
A villain, yeah.
And then there was another one. I was selling bananas. I was a banana seller. It was like a Jewish play. So you had various different things everybody would do, and people have gone on to. Some people acted in Fair City out of it, and some people, obviously the people who were doing you talk about Colin Farrell. I think Colin Farrell studied there.
Picked up Golden Globe last night.
Yeah, that's it. So no, it's a hard graft, and anybody who's made it in acting has really done well to make it, because as we all know, it's a difficult profession to make it in.
You look like someone who could quite easily play an Italian mobster, or maybe someone in a Bond film stroking a cat who slowly turns the chair around. I don't know, I'm just getting that vibe from you.
The only time I ever saw that was in the cartoon Inspector Gadget, and you never actually saw the guy. Don't know if you remember watching that chair when you were young.
I mean, I don't think they had it on RTE, and it was my mates definitely had it, but I didn't.
Yeah,
I've seen it since,
of course.
But
I can't believe this news. John.
All right, we gotta go.
Yeah,
we gotta go.
We're out of time here.
John, good stuff.
All right, guys.
More Virtual Insanity on John Duggan's Twitter feed, and of course at Off the Ball on Twitter as well. And he'll be with you on Saturday afternoon on Off the Ball on News Talk. A reminder: OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Right. Barry Kiernan says if they had 6 forwards with the same ruthless calibre as the 6 backs, they'd have won half them All-Irelands. That's the Mayo conversation. Gerard is a good comparison. He liked to choke when it counted, like in that Champions League final famously.
Yeah.
Says the Francie Brady.
Unfair.
Shane, that does protest too much, says shifty lad, cheering me up in the most miserable week of the year. As I said yesterday, this is going to be in the highlights of the year. Lee Keegan, says Ian, a great man and player, but Kieran MacDonald is the Mayo GOAT.
Oh.
We didn't actually get into the Kieran MacDonald, Lee Keegan comparison, but we have plenty of time for that. Right. Jess Kelly is with us. Jess?
Hi.
Wow.
Stinging there.
Very analogue.
Yeah.
Retro.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, very good. We spoke about the VR and Metaverse last week.
Yeah.
In connection with CES, and then lo and behold, Sony and Manchester City have a deal in place.
Yeah, it's really interesting. This is just a proof of concept, but it shows and it kind of reinforces all the points we were making last week about how this type of technology, whether you like it or loathe it, is coming to the world of sport. And the big clubs, like a lot of the big clubs, are further down the road perhaps than Man City already are. But in this video, which is published by Sony, it showcases the virtual Etihad Stadium. It shows fans running around the pitch. It shows fans connecting and getting further insight into what happens in some of the games. And I think it's going to appeal to the people who are nerdy about sport and want to get, further insight and all that kind of jazz, but also the more social aspect of it. I was listening to Joe on the Sunday Papers, and he was talking to Sinead O'Carroll and somebody else whose name escapes me about the entertainment side of games and how, they're blasting music and they're kind of killing the art of conversation and so on. And I think Metaverse is going to provide an opportunity for fans to interact in a way that they actually want to interact, rather than being forced to listen to whatever playlist is being chosen or not being able to talk at all because the music is so loud. So I think this is it's opening a world of opportunities, but it's just, as we said last week, it's about bringing people along so they're not scared of it.
Yeah, so we've just rolled the video there if you're listening on podcast, and they'll show a goal and then they'll show footage of the goal in the Metaverse being scored, and then you can position yourself as Erling Haaland to see what the goal was like being scored. It looks a little bit to me like a cartoon replay. I don't.
FIFA replay.
I'm still waiting to see the bit that takes you beyond a FIFA replay. Exactly.
But I think that's going to come over time. But to sort of reinforce the point, the production of all of this stuff is crazy money. And if you think of the development that we've seen in recent years with having, drone shots and all of the different angles of cameras placed around.
And they all enhance the experience, right?
Yeah.
I definitely, and like even, so like 3 or 4 years ago in the Super Bowl, the live cameras would be in the celebration after the score, and now you see it all the time. But the first time you see that, you're like, oh, I'm on the pitch with the players. This is amazing. And I see the benefit of that, and I see the benefit of Spider Cam, and I see the benefit of the cameras. This I can't envisage. Now, that's obviously because I'm an old lad, and maybe my kids are like, oh, Dad, you're missing the whole point here. And I might be.
Old man yells at cloud.
But,
Metaverse cloud, yeah.
Or else this is the 3D technology that had a massive launch a decade ago that was going to revolutionise the sporting experience, and it's coming to a living room near you, and
it dies a death.
It was shite.
Yeah, look, I think that is the fear factor, but as I understand it and the stuff that I've read, it would be that in years to come, it won't be the cartoony version, it won't be the FIFA video game version. It will make it feel as though you are on the pitch, and you'll be able to rewind and stand next to the player who's taking a penalty to kind of take in the full scale of things, and you'll be able to choose what angle you see certain things at, but it will be that realistic feel. It'll be like you're on the pitch. But the issue with that is to do that in real time. So if they were to try and do this for a match this weekend, right?
Yeah.
To try and do that in real time, the files would be massive and the processing would be massive, and the jumping from, behind the goal to the halfway line to whatever, it would require serious processing speeds. And I think the thing that I got from the Sony Manchester City proof of concept is that they had fans interacting with their phones. There was no VR headsets there at all. And I think the approach, as I understand it, is that they're trying to give people access to better quality entertainment experiences from watching sport, regardless of, if they have a €1,700 headset or they have a €300 smartphone. And the level of experience that you have depends on, the level of technology you have, but you won't be excluded entirely if you don't choose the VR model. But I do think it's going to be a while before we get to that sort of high-end thing where you are standing on the penalty spot with somebody and you can look all around you and all the rest. But I think that's the goal, and I think it's good to see these proofs of concept to see where we could potentially end up.
That's true, and that pushes the boundaries a good bit. It does feel a lot like sometimes this is the tech companies deciding that this is what we want you guys to do, especially like because Meta are pushing the metaverse because like it's one individual's giant folly, right? Then it can feel like, well, we're going to ram this in until you all love it. Whereas actually it's user generated stuff that has in sport in the past, like fantasy. You know, fantasy has taken over American sport, and fantasy football in England still absolutely massive.
Yeah.
Like that was because it was peer to peer and people spoke about it, and it kind of evolved that way as opposed to the league or one central power saying you're all going to do this thing, and you're going to love it.
I think that, look, you could absolutely argue that Meta is pushing the metaverse, but I think if you look at the trends in how people have watched, like Twitch, for example, people, or even Twitter, like people don't watch things just by themselves anymore. They want that communal experience. And so rather than you sitting on the couch, watching the TV with your phone in your hand, just putting out tweets and seeing what comes back, you could select who's in your virtual living room with you, or you can kind of curate your experience a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I think that's the opportunity of it. So I think you could absolutely look at it as just a company saying this is what we're doing. But I think it's got, like, loads of the stuff that we're going to talk about over the next 5 years is going to fail, and it's going to be embarrassing, and it's going to be a money drain. I think it's the stuff that comes out of that. It's the lessons you learn from failing that I think will be the next iteration that your kids will use and that will actually make these companies money. I just think we have to go through some cringy innovations before we get to the good stuff.
Yeah, I feel like even watching that video, like it all feels a little bit Black Mirror and dystopian now, but I guess in 3 or 4 years it's going to be just normal.
Well, people would have said that though about like doing an Instagram live from your bedroom,
True, yeah.
which you guys did for however many years during COVID to get your job done. So I think all technologies when they come down the track seem bonkers. And you know, in the 10 years or so I've been talking about tech, there have been so many things that have been promised to be the next big thing and then they disappear off the face of the earth. I think we are going to have some form of virtual world, and it may not be the metaverse. The metaverse could crash and burn. Like all the controversies with Meta and all the rest, we don't know how they're going to pan out. Somebody is going to swoop in and create a virtual world. And I think the big mistake that any company could make is by making their VR world closed off. So that, you know, if we wanted to talk in VR, we all had to have, say, PS5s, or we all had to have Apple's VR headset, or, you know, even the Quest. There has to be that sort of interconnectivity to ensure then that you're not leaving people who don't want to spend €1,700 on a particular headset behind. So I think it's just getting started. And I know some people are going to absolutely hate this notion, but I think there will be some clubs who do it well that you, even if you don't like that football club, you would be willing to pay, say, 50 quid to have a VR experience and walk around their stadium or get into the dressing room or whatever it is. It's going to be that extra added value, because we know that, you know, maybe Shane's age and younger, like the attention spans aren't there, and the want.
Thanks, Jess, thank you.
Look, you're
what did you say?
Yeah, exactly.
Turn up your hearing aid there. I think, you know, it's going to be about keeping people's attention, keeping brand loyalty, and making sure that there is an entertainment value. Like when I was in the US a few years ago, like years and years ago, the first time I went to Boston, we went to a basketball game, and like every 3 minutes there were people coming out shooting t-shirts into the crowd, and there were dancing mascots, and the whole thing was a production. And I think other sports, particularly here in Europe, are probably looking at the US model thinking, okay, how can we keep the attention span of the younger audience who are interested in sport but also want that entertainment value? And so it's going to be a bit of a mishmash, but you will have people saying that it takes away from the game and blah, 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 but it's coming.
Yeah, okay. The other thing that we wanted to talk about was Netflix and how everybody is probably getting served games on their algorithm at the moment.
Yeah, and this goes back to what we were just talking about in terms of the popularity of gaming and the fact that, you know, it's not enough just to be sitting down watching something on Netflix now. As you're scrolling through, maybe you open a game and you play a little game of that. They obviously have all the Netflix originals, so Stranger Things and so on. And what they're doing now is creating a row of games that appear. So if you're not sure what to watch and you liked Stranger Things, you can go into the game for a little while and you can play. But Netflix were kind of first out of the traps with this. Now we have Paramount Plus doing it. Amazon is doing it. I think Disney Plus is working on stuff as well. So gaming isn't this little niche thing over here anymore. Like, there was stats from the UK that showed that gaming was the biggest home entertainment spend last year. People are investing their money into, whether it's consoles, whether it's downloadable content for if you're playing Candy Crush, whatever it is, there's money to be made here. And we know from stats that were out last year that showed that Netflix dropped in terms of users. And there are so many players now coming out of the traps in terms of streaming services. So it's about offering that added value to the user. And I think when we see, like, Amazon has done a deal with some of the PlayStation games. Amazon is not a super popular platform here, Amazon Prime. But I guarantee you there will be people who would want to play the TV-based version or the app-based version of something like God of War, so they would sign up just for access to that, which sounds like good news for us, the consumer, that we're getting more for our money. But I just think it means that prices are going to go up, and if you like certain content, you're going to have to continue to pay for each of these platforms. Like, we worked it out on News Talk last year. I think it's, if you want the top tier of all the streaming platforms that were there at the time, which I think was 6 of them, you'd be spending €1,400 a year just on your subscriptions for TV. If that continues to go up, a time is going to come where we're going to go, look, I have to call it. And especially then if you're paying for Metaverse experiences and all the rest, it's going to get super expensive. And so I'm interested to see, who leads the charge on this and what actually takes off.
That's before you pay for your broadband to get it all piped in.
And your telly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's bonkers.
Amazon Prime's user interface is the best. Apple's is the worst.
I am really lazy. I just use voice control for all of my stuff now.
But does it work for Apple? Like, with Apple, you've got to search every time. It doesn't make any sense. Apple TV.
Yeah, I don't spend a whole host of time on Apple TV, but anytime I've used it, I usually, because again, I use the Chromecast that we spoke about last week, so I can just tell my phone to do things and then the TV will do it. And also Sky Glass is great at that as well. Sky Glass is really good because the voice control thing is built into the remote and it can then scour the entire library of stuff that's on your telly.
Sky Glass is definitely the best of the things that you're watching on it. Then I find Amazon Prime is actually, for all of the crap that they get about their various terrible user interfaces on all of their platforms, their TV one is the best.
The Kildare accent is so generic that you'd imagine Google and Apple and all these guys will be able to pick it up fairly easily. A flat Thai accent.
Anything else, Jess?
That's kind of it for this week. We're going to have, we got a bit of insight into some of the big titles coming down the tracks over the next little while. So as soon as those titles come in, and of course we are waiting the arrival of the PSVR 2, we will get to grips with that and then I'm sure have some reviews for you.
And then we can have video of us running into the wall.
I cannot wait.
Good stuff. Thanks very much. That's News Talk's Jess Kelly in partnership with Virgin Media, bringing your A game with 99.9% broadband reliability. We are going to be back in a moment. Here's what's on OTB Sports Radio for you today. The Club Championship show, the slightly earlier time of 10:10 this morning. Sonia Sullivan's OTB Gold, Koi Gig with the Emma Mitchell interview at 3 o'clock. We're going to talk about more about that in a moment. Capturing Sporting Moments is our retro panel at 4. Manu Petit at 6. And then Joe Malloy's live with Wednesday Night Rugby and plenty more besides from 7 o'clock tonight. Make sure you follow Off the Ball across our social channels and subscribe to the OTB Podcast Network for the best in latest sports content. Now, as I said, during the ad break, you're going to hear a clip from the latest episode of the Koi Gig podcast. This is blown up. This week, the Reading captain Emma Mitchell was the special guest, and she recounted being unable to run and kick a ball at the same time after giving birth because she would urinate. Mitchell asked for more research into safe return to playing for players after having a baby. The interview has subsequently been covered in the Telegraph and the Times in the UK. After the break, Kathleen's going to join us to talk through the interview's impact.
Testing 1 2 1 2 GMAC 1 2. GMAC's morning motivational moment, or something along those lines. There's so many to choose from.
Good morning, Graham McDowell here. GMAC, as you guys like to call me. Some Wednesday motivation for you now. Happy hump day. With the new days comes new strength and new thoughts. Stay strong if you're trying dry January, folks. It's just not for me. My biggest weakness, definitely a cold beer. I just can't resist them. That's your Wednesday motivation. See you tomorrow.
GMAC's morning motivational moment, or something along those lines. There's so many to choose from.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
OTB Sports Rugby.
One name to win the World Cup. If I was to throw one out right now, I would always go back to South Africa.
If France win the first game against New Zealand, I think that sets the tone. I think they're the best team in the world.
I'm going to go Ireland. I'm going to get off the fence once and for all. This is our best chance to win.
Subscribe to the Rugby stream on the OTB Sports app now.
Training and stuff of getting back, that's another thing, like an issue that clubs aren't educated in that field, are they, on how to train a very new mom to get back to fitness, right? It's all still a little bit up in the air.
Well, there's not really like any research on it, especially for like footballers, because I think they've done like a lot of stuff on like running and just like getting back running, but obviously we've got as contact, then trying to kick a ball at the same time when you've got really weak like pelvic floor and stuff, you basically just pee yourself, girls, not going to lie. So yeah, like we almost like, we were quite lucky that, well, I was quite lucky that we are kind of, because there's no any research, like in every single pregnancy is completely different. If you had the C-section or you had a natural birth or like whatever, or then everybody's recovery is going to be so different. So even if there was research, there'd only be so much that is going to be applicable to like you as the returning athlete who's been the mum. So yeah, that was quite tough, because every single day it was just like, well, how are you feeling today? Like, you could do this, you could do that. So yeah, there's not really like any blueprint when it comes to the rehab side of stuff, I think, when it comes to return to football anyway. So definitely have to like invest more into that side of the game.
Yeah, because you wouldn't have teammates to bounce it off. You're really looking at your friends outside of sport who've gone through it. Like, can't have those chats every day in training.
No, like literally nobody. Like, I remember when I first went back and I was sitting in a cupboard basically pumping as well, because like I was still breastfeeding at the time, and like just that kind of experience, like the girls are like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I've got to do this. And they're just, I don't know, sometimes didn't really want to engage in the conversation because you kind of like, they've not got the experience to even speak about it. So you're just kind of like, like plodding along yourself, just trying to get stuff done.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
So Kathleen is with us. Kathleen, you talked to us yesterday a bit about the Koi Gig Pod. It's gone global. Emma McCandy's interview with you guys has been picked up. It's in the London Times and the Telegraph, both in print and online. Reading captain, I faked injury to hide pregnancy is the headline in the Times, and then in the Telegraph it's Reading did not support captain after birth of baby. Speaking off the ball's Koi Gig podcast, McCandy, Scotland's captain, described feeling left to the side by her club during her pregnancy and postpartum. I think you expected there to be a response to the interview, given just how honest and open Emma was about her experience, but the FA have been forced to come out and issue a statement.
Yeah, we really hoped that it would be picked up. Like, we knew how important a story it was, and I suppose the thing was getting it out there so that people actually listened. Like, I don't know if you looked at some of the quote tweets on the Telegraph article for it, but there was just so many people raging at how inappropriately she was treated in the whole situation. Like, a lot of people over here might not know Emma, they might not follow Reading as much, but obviously the game over in England has grown so much, and the fact that we actually forced the FA into a response, I think you have it there in front of you, but the fact that we actually forced them into a response just shows how important this piece was, because they don't just respond to anything. And I suppose the next step now will be to see if Reading actually do come out and say, yeah, we messed up, because the whole thing is that if their licence is linked to having certain things in place, such as like proper care for players and like giving them proper maternity care and making sure that they are keeping to the standards that the FA have said, this is like the very minimum you have to do. And from what we've seen from Emma's experience, we're not entirely sure that the minimum has even been met, and then beyond that, the minimum just isn't good enough in this situation.
So the minimum is a 14-week full pay maternity, and an FA spokesman said a new minimum standard maternity policy was introduced before the start of the 2022-2023 season. It's at the discretion of clubs who directly employ the players if they choose to go above and beyond the regulations set out within our policy. That's the 14-week, and she was making the point, who's even come up with that? Surely not someone who has played football and had a baby. Is that a man?
It's the FA in some ways washing their hands. The clubs, it's up to the clubs essentially.
Well, completely, but that's even what Emma said in the interview that we had. She was like, if you're at an Arsenal or a Chelsea or a City, that's great. You probably have the facilities there to actually look after a child, or like I know over in the US, some clubs actually, whenever say a team is traveling to a different club, and like sometimes they have to travel out of state, they like hire a nanny to travel with the team, and then there's a specific room in the stadium. All the kids can go there, and then if like the player is breastfeeding, or if they just like want to see their kid after the game, whatever it is, the kid is there. And so many of those players have talked about the peace of mind it gives them, and like the ability for them to actually go out and play and not be worrying about their kid or thinking, oh gosh, how am I going to get home in time after the game to breastfeed, or whatever it might be. So like, the point is, this shouldn't just be left up to clubs. I understand that there has to be some sort of minimum, but if you're given birth and after 14 weeks, that's like just over 3 months, you have to start running, you have to start kicking, you have to start, taking tackles. Emma said it in our interview. She's like, I like to hit people when I'm on the pitch. She's not exactly the sort of player who stands back. She likes to get involved. You can't do that after 14 weeks. Like, it's insane to imagine it. And another thing she said as well was like, because her contract was so tied up with playing, and that's how she gets all her money, she felt like even when she was pregnant, she had to be training all the way up to like 8 months. I think she said she kept training until, and she was like, it's not like there was actually a program in place for me or things I was supposed to be doing. I was just turning up to the field every day and sitting on a bike by myself while the rest of the team was out playing. So, there's so many different elements, and I think it's really unfair of the FA to say it should be up to the clubs, because you're going to get such a disparity in that situation, and this isn't really something we can let there be a disparity in, because it's so integral to like a lot of people's lives.
Do you think that there's an opportunity here for this to be a bit of a turning point, and that actually, rather than just brushing under the carpet, that the conversation has started now? Like, so the two of the biggest newspapers in England have picked up on this story, and it has sparked a massive conversation.
I hope so. Like, we kind of had the same conversation a couple of years ago when Alex Morgan had her baby, and like there's actually such even a disparity in yesterday's reporting. So at the start of the day, it was announced that Melanie Leupolz, who plays for Chelsea, who's been on maternity leave for the last 8 months, had just signed a new contract with Chelsea until 2026. The whole press release went into like how they were reintegrating her to the club, and how this was like really important process for them, and they wanted to make sure those structures were in place. Now obviously, like, I don't know the ins and outs of Melanie's experience, but it seemed like a really positive thing from Chelsea. And then a couple of hours later, our podcast comes out, and you have this sort of story which is probably quite opposite to, it seemed, the approach that Chelsea was taking. So I don't worry about it in the upper levels as much, because I think those conversations are happening, even just around fertility and pregnancy in general. It's the lower clubs, and I worry that the FA will let this sink, because they'll see that there are other more important causes that they have to follow. And
well, then look, all of sports, all of the rights that players have won over the years have been won by strike or the threat of strike or militancy, as opposed to expecting wealthy club owners to do things that are injurious to their pocket.
But it is interesting, like in the interview as well, Emma says, even when she came back, because of the age range of players and stuff, it was actually really difficult to find even like players in the club who could relate to her experience, because some of them might have been in their early 20s, or maybe some were just entirely focused on the career in front of them rather than having a family just now. And she said even in that aspect she felt really lonely within the club. Like, she said she would be sitting in a cupboard breastfeeding, which again, why was she sitting in a cupboard? Why wasn't there like a dedicated room for her to go to and do that? And the girls would kind of just be like, well, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? We don't understand. And if you're not of a certain age, or if you haven't had that experience of a woman who's given birth, then it might be all new to you. So I think it's education through multiple levels, and that's why I think it's important to like bring in the entire conversation around fertility, pregnancy, playing. If you don't finish your playing career until you're 35, 36, 37, how much does the club owe you then in terms of the time you have given up your career to the club and maybe like not had a family in that time in a way that you normally would? Or what if you have more trouble getting pregnant at that stage because you are that little bit older? There's just so, like, this is a can of worms, and I'm hoping that we're kind of like eking it open a little bit and that we can keep reporting on this. And obviously if there's any Irish athletes out there as well who have had similar experiences, we'd love to hear from you. You can always get us on Twitter or the koigigpod@offtheball.com. We're always looking to tell more of these sort of stories.
All right, good stuff. That podcast is available to listen wherever you get your podcast. The best place, of course, is on the Go Loud app or on the OTB Sports app. Kathleen, good stuff. Thanks a million. It's 23 minutes past 9 this morning. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. I'm delighted to welcome Cristiano Fitzgerald to the show. Cristiano, good morning to you. How are you?
Hello, good morning. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks.
What part of the world are you in? You're in Portugal at the moment, are you?
Yeah, I'm in Portugal now.
It's a circuitous route to get there. Your upbringing is one of the great Irish diaspora stories. So you're in Portugal at the moment. I think I'm right in saying you grew up in Singapore. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was born in Singapore and I lived there for 4 or 5 years. So yeah.
And where after that?
Well, I was born in Singapore and then I moved to London when I was young, like 1 or 2 years old. And my younger brother was born. And then we moved to San Diego and I lived there for 7 years. And then I moved back to Singapore and then to Portugal. And I was in Portugal for 2 years. And then I moved back to California for a year and then came back when I was 16 to Portugal. So,
right.
And I've been here ever since.
So, Ireland is the team that you identify most with when it comes to international football.
Yeah.
How did that happen? That's an incredible story.
I think it really started when Euro 2016, when I remember when Robbie Brady scored against Italy. I remember where I was, specifically I was in Marbella in Spain when I was playing in a football tournament, and I remember watching him score and we went through, and obviously we played against my other country, France, and I did want Ireland to win in that game. Unfortunately, we didn't. But yeah, that's where it started, really.
So you said your other country. Your dad's Irish and your mum is French. Is that right?
Yeah.
We were talking about this a little bit earlier on.
It's mad. Like it's it's funny. I remember reading a story where you're talking, Cristiano, about even when you're growing up in San Diego as a kid, and even that far back, you're referencing your desire to be Irish and play for Ireland.
Yeah. I don't know where that came from, to be fair, because I don't think I ever even watched football at that point. But I did. My friend did text me after I played against Sweden last year in October. He texted me saying that he remembered me saying that to him, like that I was going to play for Ireland one day and stuff like that. So, yeah.
You must be the only Cristiano Fitzgerald in the world, I'd imagine. I think I'm going to say that fairly with ease. You were born in 2003. This is the year that Cristiano Ronaldo was breaking through at Old Trafford with the spaghetti coming out of his hair. Young teenager. I assume you're named after Cristiano Ronaldo. What's the story there?
Well, the story is that we were living in Singapore at the time and my mum was pregnant with me and they still had a name, and I think she was maybe like 7 or 6 months pregnant at the time. And my dad was a United fan, or is a United fan, and he was watching United against, who was I think it was Bolton, and Ronaldo's home debut for Man United, and then he came on, and my dad really thought he played amazing. And then he said when he was running, it looked like his feet weren't touching the ground and stuff like that. And then he said that he really liked his name as well. And so he called my mum over and said, what do you think about that name? And my mum liked it as well. So that's how I got my name.
Does it add an element of pressure? I'm sure there are quite a few Cristianos running around Portugal now, but you must have been among the first named after Cristiano Ronaldo. So is there a little bit of pressure having that name?
I'm not too sure. I guess a little bit, but no, not really.
Because you're a similar type of player as well.
I was going to say, if you were like a hard tackling centre back, no one would bat an eyelid, but it turns out you're not.
Yeah, left winger.
So you're a right-footed left winger. So you're one of these players who cuts in, and pace, I understand, is quite a significant part of your game as well, Cristiano.
Yeah.
So you've already broken into the Irish under-19 setup, and I know Jim Crawford's 21s team is probably next on the list. are you in constant touch with the FAI? Because of course we've seen examples in the past of players like Grealish and Rice who have come and gone when they've been, I guess, able to play for other countries as well. But is it a case that the FAI are in constant touch with you, and the 21s breakthrough is something that you're looking at?
Yeah, it is something that I am looking at. To look into the Irish 21 squad. I think it's one of the biggest goals of mine for the season or for the rest of the year. And I haven't really talked to any other countries or any other countries that I'm eligible for. It's only been Ireland really. So
you've just signed a new contract with Boa Vista as well. So what's the story with Boa Vista? It's tough, I guess, to break into the top 3 clubs in Portugal. You've got the likes of Benfica and Porto and Lisbon, who have been traditionally the dominant teams in Portugal. Boa Vista have always been there or thereabouts as one of the teams in the Primeira Liga. But what are your ambitions with them? Clearly, the contract means you're there to stay for the long term. Is the plan to break into the first team this season and start playing some games, or how do you foresee the next few years?
I think the plan is for the rest of the season and the rest of the year is to, break into the team, try and get as many minutes as possible. Obviously training with them every day, and I've played in quite a few friendlies already, maybe 5 or 6 friendlies. Just try and get those minutes in and trying to get an opportunity in an official game. I think that's my goal, and obviously long term is to bring success to the club and get even closer to the top 3. So,
when you say you're a left winger, obviously the role of the wide players in football has changed significantly in recent years. Are you out and out attack? Do you have a lot of defensive responsibilities? Do you help set the press? How would you describe what you see the role of the left winger as being?
I think it's all 3 of those aspects really. Obviously I do prefer to attack than I do to defend, but that's something that I think I've developed over the last few months, because at this level, coaches want you to do everything. On a youth level, you can manage to get away with it a little bit, but really the winger has to do everything. We have to be able to press really high and press efficiently, and then with the ball is, with quality to get balls into the box or, score yourself, and all those things combined, I think, is really important to make a good winger.
And so, again, obviously you try and do everything, but are you involved in playmaking, or are you trying to be more of a finisher? So obviously Mbappe is not a winger. He's definitely a striker, but we kind of talk about those left-sided or right-sided main strikers. You don't have another striker, although with France they do when Giroud is there, but when he's playing, for example, at a club level, frequently there isn't an out-and-out number 9 in the middle. Do you kind of see the role of winger as somebody who can be the main striker, or is it actually somebody whose job it is to get to the byline and create opportunities for other teammates?
It's a difficult question, but obviously I'm going to say both. But I feel like myself, I do create more than I score. But I think I still can be able to score. But I think creating is probably something that I do more.
Shane was talking about pace. I think your pace stats are off the charts. What's the fastest you've been clocked at?
I think it was 35 kilometers an hour, 35 point something. I can't remember specifically, but it was 35. Sorry.
How does that compare with your teammates?
It's one of the highest in the squad. I think one of my teammates got clocked at 36 point something this season of the game, but I think I'm up there.
Yeah, so like Mbappe at the World Cup would have been 35, or the best American footballers are kind of 33, 34, and they're obviously carrying the pads as well. But so that's obviously a key part of your game.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think my explosiveness to get past defenders or to get in behind, I think, is probably one of my biggest strengths.
One last thing, obviously, with your background and having basically been a child of the world and lived all over the world, that opens up the opportunity for you. Let's really hope things go very well in Boa Vista, Portugal. But you could play anywhere. I guess when everywhere has been home, it opens up the prospect of you playing football all over the world at some stage in your career.
Yeah, definitely. I think that moving around at a young age, as much as I did. I think obviously it's not as enjoyable as some people might think. Moving to a new school, a new club, every few years it can be difficult. But I think that it's helped me adapt, and it's helped me. I feel like I can adapt to different styles, different coaches, different players, different environments, relatively easy. So I do think that, it's possible for the future.
Do you keep an eye on players of a similar age to yourself who are Irish as well, Cristiano? Like, I guess the last couple of weeks we've been fairly heavily talking about Evan Ferguson after his couple of goals and in the Premier League for Brighton. Like, do you keep an eye on those lads and what they're achieving?
Yeah, of course. I've seen obviously some of my teammates that I had last season. I've seen that Idaho's gone from Shamrock Rovers to Millwall. Obviously, I saw that Evan Ferguson scored in the Premier League 2 games in a row, was it? Yeah. So you were on loan, I understand, for a period last year at Dundee United, and you played against Leicester City in a behind closed doors game. Like, I've seen you reference, and a lot of players have referenced of your age, the jump from under 19s to even 21s and senior football is quite significant. We even saw with your namesake Cristiano Ronaldo back in 2003. It's all step overs. It was a fairly rude awakening to the physical senior game. Have you noticed that yourself? Like, is it a thing where you're in training now? It's a definite step up in physicality. Actually, just to talk about Dundee United quickly, I actually never went to Dundee. I was supposed to, but I got injured. So yeah, it was supposed to happen and it didn't.
And the physicality element of it, when you're in first team training with Boa Vista and you're playing senior players and lads who are, late 20s, early 30s, is it a different kind of game to what you're used to?
Yeah, of course. I think that physically, I think it's a whole other level. Not only like their speed and everything like that, but it's also their endurance and how long they can run for and how the strength that they have and all that. So it is something that I've tried to work on in the last 4 months that I've been here. And I think I have improved physically because, as you mentioned with Ronaldo, when he was in 2003, he's getting kicks and shoves and he's falling on the ground all the time and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Final one for me, Cristiano. You've grandparents, I know, when you were growing up in Limerick, and you would have spent some summers, no doubt, down about Limerick. Is that a huge element in terms of your desire to play for the Republic of Ireland senior team and get into Stephen Kenny's squad at some point in the future? Like, to have that family link and heritage here is a definite, I guess, carrot for you.
Yeah. I used to go down all the time, and like whenever we had a holiday that we didn't go, I always used to be so sad because I love going down, to the farm and all that. So yeah, it is a big element for me.
Well, listen, we wish you the very best of luck, Cristiano. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. You're very good with your time. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It's Cristiano Fitzgerald from Boa Vista's training ground this morning, where he signed a full-time senior contract recently. Republic of Ireland Under-19 International.
It's a lovely kit as well, Boa Vista. It's
nice,
one of those, just stands out, the black and white for sure. So must get my hands on a Fitzgerald or C. Fitzgerald Boa Vista jersey. Don't know what squad number he is. He should be 7, let's be honest.
OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We're going to be back tomorrow morning with Shane and Aisling O'Reilly hosting. We'll have the very latest episode of Around the World with Hannon, the return of You Had to Be There with the one and only Tommy Walsh, and much more besides. Right now, we're going to leave you with the best of last night's football show, where Kenny Cunningham joined Joe in studio. Enjoy. Have a wonderful Wednesday.
106 goals in 258 Real Madrid performances, and for Wales 111 appearances, 41 goals. And so you would think that would be a very straightforward legacy. And for some people it is. People are talking about him as the greatest British footballer that they've ever seen. And yet many of us are saying, oh, that's a career tinged with what could have been. It's kind of a nuanced grey area, Gareth Bale's career. So talk to me.
Did you say could have been?
What could have been?
Oh no, I wouldn't agree with that.
You think he fulfilled his potential?
Oh, I think he did. That's it. Now, are you factoring in terms of games missed, in terms of through injury and stuff like that?
Yeah, injury factor,
but I think you've got to separate that, Joe. I think you've got to separate the time out
injured. Fair enough.
Through injury.
But I'm also throwing in, and this, I want to pick the right word because you'll jump down my throat for one thing, but also, to be fair to him, not quite attitude or application, and yet that's the sphere I'm
we're
getting
going to argue
into.
that one around in circles, Joe. We're never going to. I understand what you're saying. That's been thrown out there at him in terms of his focus and his total commitment to his profession.
Even
the golf thing.
2019, when he's barely 30, looking to move to China. I just feel this guy checked out early.
Yeah, I know. I think it's too harsh.
I think he's an amazing talent.
Phenomenal. You forget, don't you? You forget how good you forget his time at Tottenham. You know, such was his impact and his success at Real Madrid. The trophies there, the overhead kick that you're talking about. And there might be people out there, football supporters of a younger age, who actually can't remember
Spurs
that period
years.
that he had. How long was he at? How long was he at Spurs before he jumped?
He joined Spurs in 07 for 10 million from Southampton. So 07 to 13, and around the time he ruined Maicon against Inter, he just took off. And there have been a couple of good pieces. I was reading one on Football 365 about his final season at Spurs and just trying to remind you how good it was. So he scored 21 goals in the Premier League, 26 in total. Of his 21 goals in the Premier League that season, 9 of them were from outside the box, which is a record.
Yeah.
And then, as the piece said, there were knuckleball free kicks, long range strikes, lung bursting runs, followed by cool finishes. It was enough for Real Madrid to pay 85 million sterling.
It was. You're right. People forget how good he was those last couple of seasons, and you're right, he was doing everything, scoring all sorts of goals.
Came into midfield a lot.
That was coming into central areas there, winning in the pockets, dropping deep, dribbling. Remember a couple of amazing dribbles, you're right, shots outside the box and all sorts. That was clearly was at his peak. Obviously, he got the move off the back of it. So that's how good he was, and that was obviously now best league in the world, and he was probably the best player in the best league in the world for a period of time. So that goes in his favour clearly. Now off the back of the jump to even Real Madrid, I couldn't even imagine, Joe, in terms of that step, even as well as he played at Tottenham, going to a club like Real Madrid, their history there, the players which they've had, the dressing room which he went into.
Difficult dressing room.
Yeah, and having the expectation level there, and have almost immediately kind of hitting there. I don't remember those injuries around their head too often those first couple of years. No, I don't think he was out of the team for too long period. So even then, going into that kind of environment, not just holding your own, but excelling in that kind of company as well. So yeah, I don't quite buy into. I understand where you're coming from, and I think it's just the fact that so many games, so much chunk of his career was missed through injury, and that's a hard one. That's a hard stick to hit when somebody with the games you missed through injury.
Do you not feel he burned with desire for Wales? And that even him holding up the Wales golf Madrid
but that's too easy,
flag,
Joe. That's too easy, Joe. I'd use that.
His performances for Wales remained.
Good luck to him.
Exceptional.
That's the way it should be.
But for Madrid,
that's the way it
wasn't there.
Yeah, but no, I can't say it wasn't there, Joe. In terms
as things went on,
he wasn't there. He wasn't on the pitch.
Yeah,
he wasn't fit.
Well.
Are you telling me? Yeah, of course there was games you could nitpick towards the end there when he played. He didn't, you know what I mean? And there was a lot of stuff going on behind the background. There's a lot of politics at that kind of football club.
And sorry, so that's where I say the unfulfilled potential. Maybe the politics distorted things, and he fell out of love with Madrid, or something went awry, and he was looking to get to China.
Yeah, I think so.
But that is why I have this sense, and I'm not saying it's because he's a bad pro, but this sense that actually, maybe a different club, different politics, we could have seen even a whole lot more from this guy. He was that good.
Yeah, I think maybe in terms of his attitude, application towards the end, there was a lot of stuff going on in the background there. Maybe some agendas against him at the football club, trying to get him out, etc., etc. So all of that thing was going at the same time. But I mean, your point about he really turned up for Wales, looked as if he was, he was more happy turning up in a Welsh. Well, why wouldn't you be turning up for your country? That's the way it should be. You know what I mean? We don't see enough of that in the modern game. When you play for your country, so you dig a little bit deeper, you find something, you're that inspired in the people around you and what it means. And it's always been the case. It was the case when we played. I'm sure it's the case for the lads in an Ireland jersey now. It kind of means that much to them. You feel that kind of weight, responsibility, your country, your family, the whole shebang. We've spoken about it before. So you find a little bit extra. So that was clearly the case with him with Wales. So I admire that, to be honest with you. I had no problem with that, and he wore his heart in his sleeve, and he wasn't afraid to come out and say it. And even the comments, some of the comments, the interviews which he's done the last couple of days, I must admit I was very impressed in terms of how he spoke, just generally about people who had helped him, etc., but in particular how he spoke about his country and his teammates, his international teammates, and what that kind of meant to him. I mean, that was really impressive because of the reasons that you're saying, Joe, the level that he played at, the environment he was in at club level, and then he turned up for his country and he had to pull that dressing room together. He was playing with players who were operating Division 1, you know, even Division 2 standard. It didn't matter to him.
He didn't have an arrogance about himself.
Yeah, it didn't matter
that's a great
to him.
point,
Yeah, he pulled them all together. They were no different to him. They were all wearing the same jersey. They all got the same respect from him. And you sensed a bit of that as well. The players could see that in terms of how he carried himself when he was with them, and they responded to that, and he kind of probably dragged a little bit more with those players.
Funny you say that. If he had more of an arrogant presence and was more liable to do the Ronaldo hands in the air, that could have really been corrosive in that dressing room.
Yeah, I think, absolutely. This is the point that I'm making. I think he was that positive. He was such a driving force in that dressing room in terms of what they achieved, in terms of qualification for the major championships, which they did, European Championships and World Cup. Just a little bit of a shame when he eventually got there to a World Cup. World Cup's the pinnacle, isn't we all feel as if, you know, you played in a World Cup. Just when he got there, he just couldn't, you know, produce the type of performance that he would have wanted. You know, he'd done his best. He went to America, games, minutes, hundreds. Obviously, his total focus was on that World Cup, but just couldn't do it. His body just kind of let him down a little bit. He gave very little. He would have given a lot in terms of the dressing room and around the players, the hotel and all that type of thing, but on the football pitch itself, which is the most important place, just couldn't tap into that form.
So tell me this, it's a slightly reductive question, but I just want to get a sense of where you do rate this guy. He is being talked about by various people as the best British player that they've seen. Where is Bale in that conversation of British players that you've seen?
Yeah, well, you have to, forward, obviously we're talking forward attacking players here. So for me, you can never have an argument, who's the best player. So for me, you can't argue the strengths of a centre forward and a right back.
No, I hear you. We can't compare Kenny Cunningham with Messi. You're both of a level in your respective
Exactly. So you're talking about British, those forward. I haven't really given a lot of
thought,
I know,
to be honest,
but I can't. I factor in the trophies to an extent, but I'm not one of these, 5 Champions Leagues, it's got to be him. You know, you factor it in, yeah, absolutely, but that's not the be end and end all. I just think he's up there. I suppose you're talking about the last, 10 years, you're talking Rooney. I'm thinking lads who stepped out again. Rooney at Manchester United, what he achieved, he's got to be up there. I mean, longevity as well would be a factor to an extent, but again, not huge for me. And obviously, in terms of the games that he played, goals that he scored, probably 1 and 2, Joe, was a little bit less. You said over 100 and
touch less.
Yeah, for Real Madrid. But this was a lad who played as a winger, like a deep line, you know, midfield, just off the front. You know what I mean? That type of player as well. And then again, you'd factor in goals of significance, some people. So all of those, I think he's up there, Joe. We can argue around the houses.
He is right
but I think
up there.
he's there.
Yeah.
He's absolutely in the conversation. And that's where you have to leave it, I think, with this. You know, I see people fighting about these things, like, Messi, Ronaldo, Maradona and Pele, for obvious reasons, of late. You know, that conversation bubbles to the surface.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to a point to have it, and we all throw it. But at the end of the day, you have to say, listen, lads,
they're all great. No, it's a bit silly.
There's no right or wrong here.
No, we'll move on. Messi, Pele or Ronaldo?
Are you?
No, I'm joking.
You haven't even mentioned the man's name.
Who? Maradona. Sorry, of course. Yeah,
how could you not even see? That's.
I was picking up what you said. Of course, he's in that conversation. They're the 4, are they? Are those 4 a touch away from the rest?
Do you know what? I'm a little bit reluctant. Ronaldo, just a smidgen. Ronaldo in there, just a smidgen below.
It's those 3. A smidge, a bit of a gap. Ronaldo, a bit more of a gap.
Smidgen from Ronaldo to Messi. Another little smidgen, and then I think you probably take your pick, Pele or Maradona, and I lean towards Maradona. That's where I am. But that's, you know what that is, Joe. That's
emotional.
Yeah, that's emotional. I think that's how old are you, when were you, your first memories and all, what player first got into you, under your skin, and the whole shebang, isn't it? So those type of things never leave you, do they? So that kind of drives your argument. It's very hard to park that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very hard for me to say, well, you're Maradona 82, 86, what he did with Napoli, following all that, and suddenly say, I'll just park that to the side and give a, kind of dispassionate opinion on him versus the rest.
On that emotional point, the one I reach for, so how close do you have Zidane to these guys? Because for me, Zidane, I just thought, wow. Like, he's got to be very close to that group, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, he is. I think he's not far off, like, in terms of Ronaldo. It's just that people get too caught up in the numbers, Joe, don't they? Now Zidane's number, but you're talking about like an orthodox central midfield, attacking minded player, but that's what he was more of. He was kind of ball player, so he could drop deep and dictate things. Zidane. Yeah, but he was the first one I saw, the size of him, like he probably the antithesis to Ronaldo in terms. I'm not sure if you ever spent a day in the gym. Zidane.
Roy Keane always says that he was so strong. You try and kick him and nudge him.
Yeah, but that he was a lump, wasn't he? He was lumpy, wasn't he?
6'1", 6'2", I'd say.
Yeah, but like
and wide.
Not the
strong.
most dynamic in terms of movement or anything like that, but how he moved with the ball for someone of that size. How he moved, almost that kind of ballerina, but was a little bit at odds in terms of when you looked at him. Didn't kind of make sense when you looked at the shape of him, like junior footballer. Like kind of junior footballer, big lumpy lad. You know what I mean?
Big feet and had that toes pointing
didn't
inwards.
Didn't make sense.
Walk.
Shouldn't have really, shouldn't have really come together when you looked at him.
But then you fire a ball any height at him, first touch, perfect. And
but Roy was like that in terms of first touch. So Roy talks himself down technically. Players of Man United wasn't, but Roy's first touch was unbelievable.
But I agree with you. But but Zidane more adaptable. Zidane could take it at any height.
Zidane could dance with the ball. Yeah. Could dance with the ball and drop the shoulder and just manipulate. Roy probably didn't have that so much at that level as good as he was. You know what I mean? Zidane had that. That was like absolutely mesmerising. But you're right, actually. You're absolutely right.
Good.
Zidane, I think, deserves a mention.
Because he doesn't get mentioned. Like, the next names that people would go for after the conversation we had would be Cruyff.
Yeah.
Some people would throw in George Best. I think Beckenbauer would get a mention, and I think...
you're absolutely right.
I think John Giles would certainly mention Busby, and I feel Zidane is a touch forgotten, and he belongs in that second, third tier. I said Busby. Charlton. Bobby Charlton. Yeah. And I think Zidane belongs very much in that conversation.
Well, funny enough, last night, it was in my ma's last night.
I brought this up as a joke, by the way.
Hold on. So last night, flicking through the channels, I said, Jesus Christ, man, it's not going to be Gogglebox again, is it? It must be something else on.
Who's your favourite? Do you prefer the Irish or the English Gogglebox?
I drifted and them, to be honest with you. I don't mind.
If I was producing Gogglebox now, you'd be the first phone call I'd make.
Well, listen, so I switched RTA, Liam Brady documentary, 9:35.
It wasn't on.
Exactly.
What happened?
Got everything organised around
Denzel Washington when I...
Ian's house, let's get everything organised, get the kettle on, boom, tray brought in, sitting in Denzel Washington.
The Phantom documentary.
The Equaliser too, and not even the best one. Not even the best Equaliser, the second one.
That was just
I was a bit.
Yeah.
And the reason I was, because again, you're talking about, just funnily enough, players and Liam. So Liam was one for me. Liam, we all know Liam. We all know what Liam, career. But do we because I was one of them. I kind of understood generally where Liam Arsenal and jumped to Italy and all of that. But it was only during the lockdown that a little bit more. Well, hold on. Let's have a little. Liam jumped to that was a good Juventus team he went to. Hold on. They won the league that. Okay, he played most of the games.
He took the penalty, I think, did he? To win it?
Yeah, I think it was back-to-back league titles his first 2 years there. And the only reason he bounced was because Platini came in there.
Won 3 Ballon d'Ors and was, Platini.
So you look at someone like Liam from an Irish perspective and think, hold on, this is actually...
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliation.